The resignation letter was read aloud at 7:04 p.m. on a Tuesday. I wasn't at the town hall, of course. I was sitting in my living room, the lights dimmed, watching the live stream on my laptop with a lukewarm mug of tea in my hand. The camera angle was grainy, fixed on the podium where the superintendent stood, looking grave and slightly confused. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat into the microphone, and read the brief statement. Due to unforeseen personal circumstances and a need to focus on family health, Michael Henderson is stepping down from the Board of Education, effective immediately. There was a murmur in the room. I saw people in the audience turn to each other, whispering. Mike had fought for that seat for 2 years. He had canvassed every neighborhood, shaken every hand, and put signs on every lawn, including mine. For him to quit 3 months into his term on a random Tuesday without even showing his face, it was political suicide. It was an admission of guilt without stating the crime. I took a slow sip of my tea. It was bitter, but it tasted better than anything I had eaten in weeks. I looked out my front window. Across the street, the lights were off in Mike's house. His car was in the driveway, but nobody was moving. They were keeping to themselves. They were anxious. And the most unsettling part of it all was that they were reacting to something they couldn't see. To understand why a grown man would destroy his own career over a perceived threat, you have to understand who Mike was to me, and more importantly, you have to understand the specific suffocating intimacy of our little suburban quartet. We weren't just neighbors, we were a unit. My wife, Sarah, and Mike's wife, Elena, were the kind of friends who didn't knock. They walked in through the back door. They shared clothes. They planned our weekends. Mike and I were the husbands who stood by the grill, drinking IPA, complaining about gutter cleaning and property taxes. I remember last 4th of July vividly. It was humid, the air thick with the smell of charcoal and cut grass. We were on my deck, the deck Mike and I had built together over 3 agonizing weekends the previous spring. I was flipping burgers, sweating through my shirt. Mike was sitting in the shade laughing at something Sarah had said. I looked over at them. Sarah was glowing. She threw her head back, laughing at his joke, her hand resting lightly on his forearm. Just for a second, it was a casual touch, friendly. But looking back, I remember the way Mike looked at her. It wasn't the way a neighbor looks at a friend's wife. It was the look of a man who knows a secret. He caught my eye a moment later and raised his beer in a toast. "To the good life, buddy," he said. "To the good life," I echoed. I trusted him with the keys to my house. When we went on vacation, I trusted him with my tools. I trusted him to be the godfather to the children Sarah and I were planning to have. That level of trust doesn't vanish instantly. It erodes. It's a slow, sickening process that makes you question your own sanity before you question the people you love. The erosion started in the fall. Sarah had always been ambitious. She was a senior administrator for the school district, eyeing a director-level promotion that came with a significant raise and a corner office. She was stressed, understandably, but the stress began to manifest in strange ways. She stopped leaving her phone on the kitchen island. It sounds like a cliché, a trope from a bad movie, but when you live with someone for 7 years, you learn the rhythm of their habits. Sarah's phone used to be community property. It would buzz and she'd yell from the other room, "Who is it?" and I'd check. Suddenly, the phone lived in her pocket. She took it to the bathroom. She took it to the laundry room in the basement. If I walked into a room while she was typing, she would angle the screen away. Not sharply, just a subtle tilt of the wrist. "Work is crazy," she'd say, sighing, rubbing her temples. "The board is demanding so much data for the new budget." Then came the therapy. "I need to work through some things," she told me one night over a silent dinner. My childhood stuff, the pressure at work. I found a great therapist in the city, Dr. Evans. He does late sessions on Thursdays. I was supportive. I was the good husband. I told her I was proud of her for taking care of her mental health. I paid the bills. I made sure dinner was ready when she got home late on Thursdays, exhausted, her hair slightly messy, smelling of a perfume I didn't recognize as her daily scent. "How was it?" I'd ask. "Draining," she'd whisper, avoiding eye contact. "I just need to shower and sleep." I slept next to her, feeling the distance growing like a physical chasm in the mattress. I blamed myself. I thought I wasn't being attentive enough. I thought she was burning out. The truth arrived on a Sunday afternoon in November. Sarah was in the shower. I was in the living room, folding laundry. Her iPad was sitting on the coffee table. We shared the iPad. It was logged into our streaming accounts, our photo albums. I picked it up to change the music I was listening to. As I swiped the screen, a banner notification dropped down from the top. It was an email, not a work email, a personal Gmail notification. Subject: Mike joining next session. I froze. The shirt I was folding slipped from my hands. My brain tried to do the gymnastics required to make sense of it innocently. Maybe Mike was having mental health issues too. Maybe he recommended the therapist, but the subject line didn't say Mike recommendation. It said Mike joining. Why would my neighbor be joining my wife's therapy session for her childhood trauma? My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A slow, heavy thud that echoed in my ears. I looked at the hallway. The water was still running. I had 5 minutes, maybe 10. I sat down on the edge of the sofa. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to tap the icon twice to open the mail app. It wasn't just an email, it was a thread. I scrolled down, and then I scrolled further. It wasn't Dr. Evans. There was no Dr. Evans. The emails were between Sarah and Mike. They were using email because they thought it was safer than texting, harder to trace on a phone bill. They were wrong. I read things that made my stomach turn to acid. Wednesday, October 14. He's so oblivious. I feel bad sometimes, but then I remember how alive I feel with you. Thursday, October 22. Booked the hotel on 4th Street. Told him it's a late session. God, I can't wait to get your hands on me. Tuesday, Nov 3. We have to be careful. Elena looked at me weird yesterday, but I love you. We just have to hold on until the promotion goes through. Then we figure out the divorce. I stopped reading. The air in the room felt thin, like I was at a high altitude. Figure out the divorce. They weren't just sleeping together. They were planning an exit strategy. They were managing me. They were managing Elena. We were obstacles to be navigated, overhead costs to be cut from their new merger. I put the iPad down. I placed it exactly where it had been, aligned with the edge of the coaster. I didn't storm into the bathroom. I didn't scream. A strange cold clarity washed over me. It was the feeling of a person who realizes the damage is already done and now has to understand the aftermath. When Sarah walked into the room 10 minutes later, wrapped in a towel, drying her hair, I was sitting in the armchair staring at the blank TV. "Hey," she said, breezy and light, "did you start dinner?" I looked at her. I really looked at her. I looked for the woman I married. The woman I promised to grow old with. I couldn't find her. All I saw was someone who had been deceiving me for months. "No," I said. My voice sounded foreign, flat. "What's wrong?" She paused, the towel lowered. She sensed the shift. I pointed at the iPad. I saw the emails, Sarah, about the session, about Mike. The color drained from her face so fast, it was like someone pulled a plug. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't feign confusion. She knew. She sat down on the sofa, pulling her robe tighter, as if she were suddenly freezing. "We need to talk," she whispered. I waited for the tears. I waited for the "it was a mistake. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." Instead, she stiffened. Her chin went up. She went into business mode. "I love him," she said. She looked me dead in the eye. "It wasn't planned. It just happened. We have a connection that I don't have with you anymore. We were going to tell you. We just wanted to wait until after the holidays, so we didn't ruin Christmas for the families." "You wanted to wait," I repeated. "To manage us." "To be kind," she corrected, delusionally. "Mike and I are planning to be together. We're going to file for divorce. I think it's best if I go stay at a hotel tonight." She stood up, she walked to the bedroom, packed a bag, and left. The door clicked shut. I sat in the silence of the house we bought together. I thought about Mike. I thought about the deck. I thought about the wine. I felt a sorrow so deep it felt like physical bruising. But over the next 3 days, as I lay in the dark, unable to eat, unable to sleep, the sorrow began to harden. It settled into something heavy and focused. She had left me with nothing, but she had forgotten one thing. Mike was a public figure now. He was on the board of education. He loved the title. He loved the little nameplate at the meetings. He loved walking around town knowing people recognized him. And Sarah was a district employee. I worked in compliance for a logistics firm. I knew rules. I knew policy. And I knew that in our school district, a romantic relationship between a sitting board member and a staff member seeking a promotion was a massive, unavoidable conflict of interest. It was unethical. It opened the district to lawsuits. It was a scandal waiting to happen. I could have just reported them. I could have sent the emails to the superintendent. It would have been effective, but it would have been too quick. They would have spun it. They would have played the victims of a love that couldn't be denied. I didn't want them to be victims. I wanted the situation to resolve through their own decisions. I wanted them to feel the pressure I had felt. I needed leverage, or rather I needed them to believe there was scrutiny they couldn't control. I waited a week. I let them get comfortable in their new reality. I let them think I was just the sad, broken husband keeping to himself. Then I called Sarah. It was 10 a.m. on a Thursday. I knew she would be at her desk. "Hello," her voice was cautious. "Professional, Sarah," I said. I made my voice shake. I forced a tremor into my breath. "Listen, I need to warn you." "Warn me? About what?" "I was drinking the other night." I lied. "I was in a bad place. I met up with a friend of mine, Dave. You don't know him well. He's an old college buddy. I told him everything. I was just venting. I didn't think he'd take it seriously." "What did you tell him?" Her tone sharpened. "About you? About Mike? About the promotion?" I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Dave is very principled, Sarah. He reacted strongly when I told him Mike was on the board and involved with you while voting on your contract. So," she snapped, "who cares what your friend thinks?" "He's going to the meeting," I whispered. "The public board meeting next Tuesday. He says it's a violation of public trust. He says the taxpayers need to hear it." "What?" "He signed up for the public comment section." I continued, pitching my voice into panic. "He says he's going to read the emails. He said he's going to list the dates you were in therapy and cross-reference them with board votes." I tried to stop him, Sarah. I told him it would hurt everyone, but he won't listen. He says he's doing it for accountability. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "You have to stop him," she hissed. "That will destroy Mike. If that gets out in a public meeting, the press covers those meetings. The parents are there." "I can't," I said. "He blocked my number. He said I'm too close to it. He's going to be there, Sarah." Tuesday night, he said he's bringing copies of the emails for the press. There was a long silence. Then the line went dead. I put the phone down on the kitchen counter and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The next 4 days were a lesson in sustained anxiety. I watched from my window. I saw Mike's car pull into the driveway, then leave 10 minutes later. I saw the lights in his house burning at 3 a.m. I saw him pacing in his backyard, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly. They were cornered by uncertainty. If they did nothing, Dave would stand up on Tuesday and expose everything in front of the entire town. Mike's reputation would collapse. He would be known as the man who blurred the line between public office and personal gain. They couldn't reason with Dave. They didn't know who he was. They couldn't prepare for him. He existed only as an idea. Their only option, the only way to remove the conflict before the meeting, was to eliminate the conflict itself. If Mike wasn't on the board, the situation became just a private affair. Still damaging, but not a public ethics violation. Tuesday came. The clock ticked towards 7 p.m. I imagined them watching the time, bracing for every unknown face walking into the town hall auditorium. I imagined Mike adjusting his tie, scanning the room, and then he chose certainty over risk. He sent the letter. He resigned. He stepped away from the seat he had chased for years. I watched the live stream. The superintendent read the resignation, and Dave never stood up. The public comment section came and went. A lady complained about the cafeteria pizza. A man complained about the bus routes. And then the meeting ended. There was no Dave. There never was a Dave. But the fallout didn't end with the resignation. The superintendent, a decent man who had known our families for years, wasn't naive. In small towns, explanations travel quickly. He understood why Mike had stepped down. 3 weeks later, The announcement for the director promotion was released. It went to an external candidate from 2 towns over. I heard through a mutual friend that Sarah was called into HR. They didn't fire her, but they made it clear that her judgment was under review. She was reassigned to a satellite office, a basement department handling archives. It was a professional dead end. Wait, before we see what happened next, what would you have done in this situation? Let me know your thoughts below. I'm curious to see your perspective now. Where were we?
Ah, right. The divorce papers came a month later.
We met at her lawyer's office to sign the final division of assets. She looked tired. She had aged years and weeks. The brightness was gone. We signed the papers in silence. I got the house. She wanted a clean break. As we were walking out to the parking lot, she stopped. She looked around, scanning the cars. "Where's Dave?" she asked. I wanted to see the face of the man who ruined us. I stopped at my car door. The autumn wind was blowing leaves across the asphalt. I looked at her and felt nothing. "Sarah," I said softly. "There was no Dave." She frowned. "What?" "I made him up," I said. "There was no friend. Nobody was coming to the meeting. You made your choices on your own." The realization landed hard. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You?" she said. "You're twisted." "No," I said, opening my car door. "I'm just someone who trusted his neighbor." "Goodbye, Sarah." I drove away. So where are we now? Mike works in sales for a mid-tier company now, commuting an hour each way. He lost his pension. He lives in a small apartment on the edge of town. I see him sometimes at the grocery store. He avoids my aisle. He looks diminished. Sarah is still in the basement office. The relationship they tore 2 families apart for didn't survive intact. Deceit doesn't age well under pressure. They're still together technically, but they're unhappy, held together by pride more than affection. And me? I kept the house. I restained the deck last weekend. It looks better than ever. I've started hiking again. I have a date on Friday with a woman who leaves her phone on the table when she goes to the restroom. I enjoy the quiet of my home. It's not lonely, it's calm. Sometimes late at night, I sit on the deck and look at the empty spot where Mike used to sit. I drink my wine, and I think about how fragile certainty can be for people who believe they're untouchable. You don't have to shout, you don't have to confront. Sometimes all it takes is letting people face the consequences of what they already know.